I'm recording. Hi.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited.
Are you feeling excited about the tour?
Nervous energy.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excited, nervous energy. Yeah.
I'm overthinking things like this weekend. I was like, feel like I need another wallpaper, like another, and then I just was like, it went down a rabbit hole, and it was just because I'm overthinking. So I'm like, no,
Uh-huh.
stop it. You're not allowed to think about this right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel that nervous energy. Well, thank you for agreeing to chat with me. I'm really excited about this. We've been kind of meeting offline for a year and a half now, or more, honestly, but um and I thought it'd be really fun to chat with you and, talk about the tour and your work and, whatever comes up in between.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to like spend a little bit of time introducing yourself, but I just wanted to also talk about how we met. I was like, I think Leona she was really young, and you reached out, you messaged me, and it was like the perfect timing because I was feeling super lonely in my like early motherhood stage. And the pandemic hadn't happened at that point. And you were like, I'm having this art party um for local people in the surrounding area. Would you like to come? And I was like, yes. This is awesome. I don't know who this person is, but this sounds like exactly what I need right now. I know, it's hilarious that I was like, so game. And then I like, as so many other people, have just found you just such an inspiration, and I've just loved our friendship. And you like actually were one of the very few people that I got to have lunch and dinner with and stuff during the pandemic, and also
Yeah.
early motherhood. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
It meant a lot more than you probably even know.
It was so funny for that party I invited you to. I invited um people I had like met a couple times in the area who were like other female artists, and you were one of the people on my list I wanted to meet because I saw you were in Phoenixville, and I was like, this is so weird that I'm just like sending this stranger a DM to come to my house. It wasn't even a public place. I'm like, come over to my house.
Yeah, I guess maybe hopefully I gave off the vibe that you could trust me, I guess, somehow.
Yeah, I'm like, well, she'll say no if she doesn't if she doesn't want to come over.
Yeah. No, I think I was so giddy. I was like, look, Steven, somebody, like-minded individual wanting to get together. But I'm glad that, yeah, it was awesome, and met so many people at that party and continue to like stay friends with a few of them. And it was such a great time. And yeah, I just value so much your ability to connect, and just how you've kind of like cultivated this community in Phoenixville. It's awesome. And so that brings me into the next thing I wanted to just bring up, was that you're doing the Artists of Phoenixville magazine, but also the account, and which is just, you continue to connect the whole community, the artistic community locally. And I love the magazine. It's absolutely beautiful from a design standpoint, and like being the way you curate it. And it's just so fun. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, or share.
Yeah. Well, I think it's actually tied to the party that I initially invited you to, because people think it's funny that I'm an introvert, because a lot of people don't expect I'm an introvert, but I am an artist introvert. And I think being an introverted artist, I know what I need to like be engaged with other people, and to like actually to want to leave my house to hang out with other people. And so I use that as a way of like gaining insight to like connecting with others, especially other introverted artists. So it's like, okay, if I were to actually leave my house and go to a stranger's house for a party, like what would that party need for me to actually go there? And then when I created Artists of Phoenixville, I was also thinking about like the introverted artists. This is the Instagram platform I'm talking about. So when I thought of that Instagram platform, I'm like, okay, what do I want someone to be doing for me? I'm like, oh, if there was just an account that was posting local artwork and it motivated me to share my artwork because this other account would repost it, like that's what I would personally want. So then I created that. And then the magazine was kind of the same mindset of, okay, like this Instagram account is going really well. Like what would be really interesting for me as an artist in this community? I'm like, well, I think print is amazing. And I love having, being able to like hold a paper copy of a magazine in my hand and not just online. So I was like, well, let's just try this out because I know it's what I would want. So let's see how it does. And yeah, it turns out other people are down with print magazines as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it was I think the community needed it during this time. And it was just
Mhm.
such a great way to stay connected when we couldn't really stay connected.
Yeah. Yeah. The timing of that was definitely a big influence as well, because for launching the Instagram platform, it was like, well, we can't gather together. And how do we create that sense of community with our neighbors when we, can't be hanging out in large groups? Like, how can we still have that feeling? So it's definitely born out of that as well.
I was actually thinking about how we did the art show. We did an art show together in 2021.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking about how awesome it was that we did that because it like nothing was happening.
I know.
And you're like, we're gonna do this thing. And I'm like, all right, Emily, sounds good. Whatever you say. And it was so fun. And it gave us like so much, it gave me something to work towards and be like really excited about. So thank you for that.
Yeah. That was
Um,
fun.
yeah, and that collection that you created for that show was just amazing. And it brings me to my next thought, which is that I've long admired your ability to kind of like create a collection and work in that collection. And I am just fascinated by like how, like what the process is that keeps you engaged in that.
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to share at all about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I'll
I'd
share.
love to hear.
So part of that is I know that I'm the most effective or most efficient with my own time in my studio when I am excited about something. And so if I feel that energy of being really excited about an idea, I will just make as much work as I can while I have that feeling, because there's nothing worse than just like showing up to the studio with the feeling of I have to create something, it has to be meaningful. It's a piece of artwork. And I try not to create in that mindset because I know how inefficient it is. And it's like, why even bother trying to make work if it's going to take me, so much time to make one piece I don't even like. So if I'm feeling really pumped about something, I just lean into that and I let myself create as much work as I want to create with that imagery. And so for that show in 2021, I was like tunnel vision on dandelions. I was originally going to do all types of wildflowers for that show. But then I'm like, I can't stop making these dandelions. So I don't even know how many pieces I made with dandelions, but the entire show of what I did for that restaurant exhibition was all dandelions. And then later that year, I launched an entire another collection of exclusively dandelions.
Oh,
But
that's right. I forgot
yeah,
about
I
that.
did two different, which is crazy. I think I only made dandelions in 2021. But I was excited about it. And so it made me really efficient. And then the more I leaned into it and allowed myself to create, I was discovering meanings within the dandelions of like why I was connecting with it visually and then symbolically. And so letting myself stay in that zone helps me discover the meaning of my work versus just doing one dandelion piece and then be like, that was cool, moving on to the next thing. I can kind of like marinate in my thoughts and like just really be intentional about the stuff I'm creating, even though I'm like creating it with this excitement and joy, it still is able to be distilled down into like something really meaningful.
That is so interesting because we were talking about this another like a previous time offline, how our thoughts change around our work as time evolves. And so I didn't actually tie that together, but I think that's awesome to put together that you are spending more time in that, because then you can think about it more like how do your thoughts and like what you feel evolve around your work while you're working on it. Is that how you think about your, like if you're going to do like for instance the dandelion collection, did you come up with the vision of I want to do a dandelion and like I'm going to use this medium, or did you have a feeling or a thought that you wanted to like bring to life and you like what came
I
first?
always start with the visual component first before I go into the meaning, because if I'm motivated to make 15 pieces of just dandelions, there's some underlying thing of why that's meaningful and significant to me. So I don't get super caught up into what does this mean with my artwork in the beginning phases, because I know there's a reason why I'm choosing to make all of these dandelion pieces. And another artist is not choosing to make those, even if they work within wildflowers and weeds. And so I just will trust that like my visual instincts, whatever is happening, is related to something else. And then I will pick that apart as I'm creating in the studio. Sometimes I'll be thinking about that, or sometimes I'll just like see this massive work, you know, in front of me, like, oh, like that's why that was so significant to me. So
Like, oh, it like hits
that's
you over the head, like hindsight. Yeah.
right, right. So I always start visual, and then I pick out the meanings from what I'm creating.
That's interesting. So I've heard you talk a lot about reimagining your work, and I just find it fascinating, like that whole process of, you know, kind of staying in the collection, but then reimagining the subject matter. And I'm just curious if you could talk about the lifeline of that and like how it's evolved and how do you feel about that now in terms of the collection that you're releasing at the studio tour?
Yep. So the work I'm doing now and I'm creating for the studio tour is all under what I'm calling the Mind Blooms collection. And that's basically a series of flowers that I picked that have different symbolism tied to those flowers. And I'll just show you the invitation of this tour so you have a visual. So I made these flowers that are in this image. I picked them all from symbolism, from the language of flowers and different modern interpretations. And I created this Mind Bloom series where it's a figure and it's flower hair growing out of the figure. And the underlying theme is that when you are cultivating the native plants of your garden, then that's when you're going to have like the most unexpected, beautiful garden that's thriving in its natural element versus trying to like take those out, transplant more exotic things, whatever that may be. And that's all related to like your human self. Like if you cultivate your natural talents and strengths, you're going to like evolve into a way more like beautiful, unexpected person than you would if you're trying to just like be good at what everyone else is good at, whether it's like personality traits or academic things. So it's all about nurturing who you actually are so that your truest version can be thriving. So that's the underlying theme of that. And I created this, I swear this is all related. I started with
Oh, it's like we're soaking it all in. It's so good. Yeah.
well, it's by now over a year of like this developing. So I've been on this for a while. So to create this, I made screen printed images of these florals. And so something that I'm really interested in is limitations and how having limitations make you think outside of the box, get you to unexpected places when you have to work within those. So that's actually, I don't think I've ever told you this, but that's why I like working with screen printing and using those screen printed flowers to collage all different types of portraits, because I'm bound to these specific shapes. And how far can I actually like lean into this to create portraits, like endless amounts of portraits.
Yeah.
And so that type of like forced parameters makes me really creative. And I am always thinking like, ooh, how can I push this even further? How can I make this grow? How can I make this feel totally new within these same like visual guidelines? And so it started with the screen printed portraits where I was doing charcoal portraits, screen printed hair. And that was an entire show I made last spring. And then I was still really onto this visual imagery, and the theme is just so personal to me of like actually nurturing who you truly are and not being afraid to lean into that. And so I was like, how can I like continue to explore this without doing the same exact thing? Because I love learning. I love like trying new things out. And so then I turned it into this whole cyanotype portrait where I was taking images of my collages that I made, making those into digital collages, and then doing cyanotype images. So I was reinventing this whole series from last spring for the fall, and it was all blue because cyanotypes are blue. And so it was an entirely blue collection of digital collages of the analog collages. So there's like so much inception that's happening. And then, which has now led me to, actually, no, there was a series in between that. There was the risograph series, which I can show you.
Oh yeah. So this is, oh my goodness.
So this is the third iteration. This is based off of the original analog collage, which was then turned into the digital collage. And then I brought that digital collage back into Photoshop and made this double vision image to create a risograph print show. So it's all like,
And that's still available, right? People can still see
yeah,
that.
these ones are still available. There's two different ones.
That Ravensgate.
Yeah, Ravensgate in Phoenixville. The show will be up through the end of April.
Okay.
So yeah, it's like this is the third version of this series. So that was this current spring, earlier this year.
Is
And
that
then,
the only version that has multiple multiples? Oh no, your cyanotype has multiples.
yeah.
Okay.
So the cyanotypes had the figure mirrored one time.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the figure mirrored and then just like used again into like a repeat. So, and this was definitely a postpartum influence of just like kind of separating as a person, like, okay, how do I keep it together?
Well, it's hilarious because like when you talked about that specifically on, I think it was Instagram, I was like, oh yeah, I know that. Like, yeah,
I know.
like, I totally can relate.
I just feel like the CMYK is like, whoop,
Yes.
not keeping it together. She said, laughing maniacally. So bringing it back around to the studio tour. So this is technically, I guess, the fourth version of these portraits I'm doing. And this is my county collector for the show. This is using the analog screen printed collage, but then I'm now doing these stencil portraits. The portraits are not in charcoal, they're with a stencil. So
Okay.
using aerosol spray. And then I'm even moving a little bit further away from those analog collages and doing which is now the stencil portrait. So these flowers, I made a stencil that I hand cut of the flowers, and I'm now spray painting the floral hair on to these pieces. And this is leaning into more of like a street art look of, you know, graffiti and wheat paste and stenciling.
So that one doesn't have any, it doesn't have any screen prints or.
So, well, what's interesting, the flowers in the hair are not screen printed, but I actually have the piece here. It's huge. We'll see if I can show you. So there is white on here,
Mm-hmm.
and the white in the background, it's a little tricky to see. This is actually the original screen I burned for the Mind Blooms collection, just printed in the background to have kind of a wallpaper.
Oh, that's right.
So
yeah, I
these
vaguely
are
remember.
screen printed, but the black is all from the hand cut stencil.
There's so many different processes happening in this. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Is there something about the layering of the processes that interests you that you can like actually articulate, or is it kind of hard to articulate that? Because it feels hard to understand or not understand, but it's like so complex, like all the different layers of your process.
Yeah. So for this series in particular, all of us are focusing on the word dwell. And for me, and what that means to my work and to the Mind Blooms theme, I'm thinking about like an old house. And when you go back into that house and there's like carpeting, and you're like, it's like kind of nasty. So you pull it up and there's hardwood floors. And it's like, why did you ever cover up these floors? Like, that's a sin. And so I see that in the same way of like, why did you remove these native plants from this garden? Like, those were incredible, made for this environment, and you've replaced them with something that does not even belong here. And so I'm using that in the terms of like thinking about a home that you're trying to get back to the original beauty. And so by having these different layers in here, I'm reaching back to the original Mind Blooms series and having those influences show through into the portraits that I'm making this year. So I like having that history of the pieces in there. Yeah. And then this piece in particular, the aesthetic is reaching back to a lot of the work that I was doing in college. So for my senior show, I had a ton of stencil work and like very expressive paint and just very carefree, expressive street art feeling pieces.
I loved how you described when I saw the piece in person and you were describing the layers of it, and I was like, yes, like the green
Mhm.
color, what you said about the green color. Can
Yeah, yeah.
you?
So the aesthetic is going back to like earlier work I made, but then for my color choices for this piece, I have this green oval spray paint, which that oval is kind of a symbol I've used throughout the whole Mind Bloom series because it's all connecting back to like old cameo portraits, which leans into the language of flowers concept. And so for these pieces, I still wanted to do that oval, but in more of a subtle way. So I spray painted this green, mint green oval behind the portrait. So it has that oval, but that mint green is, I chose it because that when you go into an old house, especially in like Pennsylvania, rural area, there's often like mint green is like all the kitchen cupboards, or the front door is this mint green. It's like, it's so stark against the decay that you're like, whoa, what is happening here? And so I wanted to have that oval in the background as like the stark burst of color, but referencing like when you go into one of those old homes and it's like you just struck with like, whoa, holy cow, mint green.
I remember in my parents' kitchen there was a remnant of that somewhere, like it was underneath the paint and it was covered up, but I like that specific color was underneath there at some point. And so like when you, and it's such a specific green, like I love greens, and like I don't feel like people are really using that green, and when I saw it I was like, that's that green, like it's a very specific green, you like nailed it. So I love that. Anything else that you want to share about that piece?
I think it's one of those pieces where I'm still discovering things about it, but something that's interesting about this collection is I'm working into concrete. And so my other surfaces have been paper or like collage onto a wood panel. And so I really wanted to work on concrete because I've always been like, I love the contrast of the floral on the concrete. Like, I think that's very interesting. And I love the idea of it being like a sculpture garden and having it like that Victorian feel. And you have these cement textures. And I'm adding little bits and details of faux moss onto them so that has that garden feel. But I think there's also an influence of me traveling into Philly to visit my grandmother, or I had grandparents out in Western PA as well, maybe traveling along the train lines, and there's just incredible graffiti on these old train cars, or as you're going into Philly, there's graffiti, or even like the mural arts influence with all the incredible murals in the city. And so I think a lot of the aesthetic from this of like the paint on the concrete is showing through, of just being influenced through that for my entire life, basically.
Oh, I love how it's like all coming together in this way. And actually it kind of answers the question of like, how do you stay engaged in one subject matter? Because it's like, really, it's not one subject matter. There's like all these things going on in this work, and it's incredible. I think it's totally relatable too, because all of us have like, it's just our human experience, like one thing isn't going to remind us of only one thing. It reminds us of like all of our memories, and like maybe something that we're longing for, or any of that, and I love how I can feel that in your work. I have a couple of your pieces, so yeah, I'm a collector and I love your stuff. So I wanted to just like give you a little credit, because I have to tell you, even hearing you talk about your work, I know that me following my intuition with my painting has totally been a result of our friendship and talking through these things, because you're saying that like you're encouraging yourself or whomever to like embrace what's there, what's part of you. And I'm just like, oh, totally, like me doing more of the intuition work has to do with the influence of you. And I just think that when I'm doing work, and actually I called you earlier to ask you a question, because I don't ask a lot of people questions about my creative process or my work, but like I ask you. And it's like, I relate you kind of to my dad, because there's certain times where I like have my dad's voice in my head, like, okay, like drive closer to the middle of the road. But like when I'm working on my artwork, I feel like I have like a mini Emily on my shoulder, where I'm like, what would Emily do? And even when you said the restraint thing, I'm like, that makes so much sense, because I'm not one to put restraints on my work. And I feel like you're so good at being like, Cynthia, you should probably put some restraints. You don't say it like that, but I just so appreciate that about you, but I just value your advice, and I know that you encourage so many people, and I just wanted to give you that little credit because I think it's really special. And I also wanted to hear like who really inspires you, because I know you're like, you're such a big inspiration for me.
Well, I'm a podcast junkie, as you know,
Mhm.
and I will just listen basically all day to podcasts if I could. So right now, who I am being very heavily influenced by is Brian McDonald, my new
Mhm.
best friend. I pretend he's my friend, from the You Are a Storyteller podcast. And what's interesting is he's not an artist, but he's a writer, he's a director, he's given lectures at Pixar, and basically he's a storytelling expert.
Mhm.
And I love listening to his podcasts because there's so much crossover with storytelling, whether it's writing or video or whatever, to art. And I love being able to hear him talk about how to tell a story well, or how to tell a story in service of others, and thinking like, how does that apply to my artwork? Like, what are the different themes that I'm putting into my work, or how is my work in service to others? And it makes me create better work, and it also makes me speak about my work in a way that people can track and like follow, like, oh, that's what she means when she's doing that. And so I've been getting so much wisdom from that podcast. I finished listening to every episode on Spotify, and I'm now like going
Wow.
back through. I know I'm a total junkie, going back
No,
through and listening to my favorite ones because they're
no,
so
you
good.
pointed me to some and they were amazing. So
Yeah.
I totally get that. I think that that's one of the many benefits that I've had of working with, or like meeting with you and Tina Crespo throughout the last year and a half, is like the storytelling aspect of our art,
Mhm.
and just sitting around and talking about how our life influences our art. And like
Yeah.
it's helped me to articulate it, but I can understand fully why that's interesting to you right now. And I think it really helps other people to understand what we're doing when we can actually explain it. Uh,
Yeah.
and I feel like those storytelling, his insights are so good for that
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah.
But I need to listen to some more of them. You introduced me to so many, but my favorite is Andy J Pizza. Like
Oh, yeah.
every time I hear is like when I basically anytime I listen to his podcast, I have an insight. It might not be directly related to anything he said, but somehow I arrived there through what he said.
Mhm.
And I'm forever grateful for that recommendation. Okay, so I have one last question for you, and then if you want to share anything exciting
Okay.
or upcoming, you can. But I want to just say, like, for your work, who is it that you're really creating for besides yourself, or is it, yeah? What are your thoughts around
Mhm. So for the whole Mind Bloom series, I intentionally cover the eyes in all of the portraits. So these are all self-portraits. I was the model for all of these. I took photographs and then picked the best ones to create the portraits, but they really aren't necessarily me. And I cover the eyes in the portraits so that whoever is looking at the artwork actually can kind of see themselves as the person who's in the portrait, and thinking about like who you are and your natural traits and what you should be like paying attention to and cultivating versus trying to transplant. So when people look at my artwork, my goal is that they see themselves in it and are able to apply whatever they're up to or who they are to the artwork. So that's kind of my intention with all the different portraits I'm creating.
It makes so much sense. It like ties everything that you do together. The magazine and like how you show up to build community and
Yeah,
like artwork, it's all like related. So it makes a lot
I
of
didn't
sense.
even think about that, but yeah.
Um, so yeah, is there anything upcoming that you want to share, or anything exciting, or what are you excited about?
The studio tour is definitely the biggest thing on my plate right now. I just finished the next PXV Art Mag, and all of my magazines should be delivered on time for that show, which is May 5th at Ravensgate.
Oh yeah.
So that's a huge stress relief. But I am very excited to have that issue out and bring this back to Brian McDonald, my buddy. So for the magazine, I, kind of write an intro for it describing what's going on, and like having his influence on me, being able to show up to that magazine in a way that's in service for others, and, being able to be a voice for the art community. The cover artist was selected by the guest curator, Jordan Cunningham. And Jordan Cunningham is a tattoo artist and she's a fine artist. And one of the artists who submitted is also actually a tattoo artist and a fine artist. And so being able to put the light on them and introduce them in a way where they can be talking about, you know, tattoo culture and the crossover into the fine art world, that has been super exciting, to be able to provide a platform for all different types of artists. So I'm very excited about this issue. And yeah, that's my
Where
favorite.
can you get that magazine? I know I got it on Amazon, or I don't know.
Yeah, you can just order it online.
Okay.
Once
It's artists.phoenixville.org or
it is artists of pxv.com.
okay.
Yeah. So it'll be
All
on there.
right. Well, thank you for taking the time. I know you have little Ivy. How old is she now?
Yeah. She's going to be
5
6
months?
months this week.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, I'll be seeing you soon and
Okay.
and we'll talk soon and have a
Yeah.
great day.
Sounds good. You too.
All right. Bye.